Houston Real Estate Radio starts right now.
You're listening to Houston Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Shannon Register, and every week we bring you news and information you can use on your next real estate transaction. This segment of the show is actually sponsored by The Perfect Light. They are an outdoor landscape lighting company, perfect for this time of year so that you can enjoy your outdoor patio area. And also, they also have mosquito misting systems, which are really nice here in Texas when the bugs come out. You can send us your real estate questions, 281-882-8088. You can also tweet them to us using hashtag HRER. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and you can go to HoustonRealEstateRadio.com. If you missed any of the show, if you do miss any of the show today, you can go to Facebook or to HoustonRealEstateRadio.com and catch those videos. So I'm here in the studio today with an attorney and shareholder, Brady Ortego, and he is with Roberts Markel Weinberg. Did I get it right?
Ortego is my last name, but yes.
Ortego. Okay. All right, Brady. So I'm going to stick with Brady if that's okay.
That's fair.
All right. So what I want to talk about today is really HOAs, because I hear a lot of people, we sell them their house, they get settled, everything's going well, and they start having issues with their HOA. And one of the biggest issues that I hear from clients is something goes wrong and has to be replaced, and they didn't get it approved. So, for example, the fence needs to be replaced, and they feel like, well, we're just replacing the same fence that was there, or we're putting up another fence that's exactly the same. What is the big deal? So what is the big deal?
Sure. Anyone that's interested in buying a home, or that currently has a home in a deed-restricted community, should certainly take the time to read the deed restrictions, read the rules, read any procedures that would apply to them as homeowners. It's very common in communities these days to have an architectural review component. Mm-hmm. It's simply something that is required in their documents. And from a homeowner standpoint, I understand. They're just replacing a fence. It's the same height, same type of wood. What is the big deal? The fact is that is a requirement in their documents, and the committee and or the board is just trying to follow the letter of what's in those documents.
So for some people who are moving here from out of state, they don't understand the whole HOA thing. I mean, I've lived here for years, and I don't know if I understand it. It's the way that I understand it is you have a homeowners association made up of community members who are on the board, and then you've got a management company that actually does the billing and that sort of thing. Is that right, or is there more to it than that?
There's a little bit more to that. You're close, though. A community association or homeowners association is a nonprofit corporation in accordance with the laws of the state of Texas. Now, every corporation has to have a board of directors, mm-hmm. and there comes in your volunteer board members who are homeowners within the neighborhood. And because they more likely than not have day jobs and other things that they have to tend to, they will often contract with a management company to help manage the accounting. The management company also bid contracts like for landscaping or pool maintenance. Mm-hmm. The management company, they don't have to be there, but they're there to help the board members kind of keep the business, the operation of the association.
Because there are some HOAs out there that don't use a management company, that still do it all themselves, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So or dealing with the HOAs, there have been some changes over the last few years, and some people would call them good changes. What do you think?
This year's changes I really like. There were sweeping changes back in 2011.
Well, let's talk about those first. So the big changes back from 2011, what were some of those?
Probably the biggest one, the one that I get the most questions on, relates to open board meetings. Most associations, or all associations now, are required to have open board meetings.
So anybody who lives in the community can attend the meetings and has to be notified that there is going to be a meeting, right?
Absolutely, correct.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, and another big one was a change to the process for foreclosure. Essentially, what the legislature did was create an expedited foreclosure process. It's very similar to the way home equity liens were foreclosed. There's a judicial element to it in that judges will sign off on or approve the foreclosure, and it's just another layer of protection for both sides to make sure that the foreclosure is going forward the way it should.
So did the changes in the foreclosure process help homeowners, or help the banks to be able to foreclose faster, or help the homeowners to be able to stay in the homes longer?
Well, essentially what it did was it helped them. It helped ensure that if a foreclosure was going forward, that it was correct.
Okay.
The former method, the non-judicial method, was merely a series of notices.
Okay.
And the process was very quick for some associations, and the devil's in the details. And there were a lot of little simple minor things that kind of led to a foreclosure that maybe could have been done differently.
Do you think anybody who's making their house payment that just doesn't pay their HOA ever gets foreclosed on?
It does happen.
Wow.
Yes.
With a lot of equity in the house, they just don't pay the HOA for one reason or another.
It does happen.
Wow. When I talk to homeowners and they're upset with their HOA, that's what they do, is withdraw they don't pay their bills because they're upset with the HOA for whatever they're arguing over. A drainage ditch wasn't corrected the way they felt it was, and then the HOA should have stepped in because the developer's saying it's the HOA that needs to step in, and the HOA is saying that needs to go back to the builder, and the homeowner just gets caught up in all that and says, well, I'm just not going to pay my HOA dues until y'all come fix this, or you reimburse me for the bill, or whatever the case may be. Is that the kind of thing that you find, is that people get upset and just don't pay the bills? Other than the ones who just can't afford it,
right,
that aren't paying their mortgage either.
That does happen from time to time, and I would certainly point out that the obligation to pay assessments is an independent obligation of anything that the association and or developer is supposed to do. If you do have a gripe with your association or a developer, you want to have clean hands. Pay the assessments and then address the concerns that you have in the appropriate manner. Because once you get behind in your assessments, it's not an excuse.
Makes you look bad.
In your documents, it's
right,
often not an excuse that you can quit paying your assessments because you're unhappy with the community.
So on the 2013 changes that just happened, tell us about those new HOA changes.
Sure. The big one, and this is just a reaction to the recent drought that Texas has suffered, is a xeriscaping bill. What this bill does is it allows owners to install drought-resistant landscaping and or natural turf. There are some documents out there that probably prohibit this type of landscaping and or turf. Legislature made it clear that you can't stop homeowners from installing this type of plant material in their yards.
Now, can they specify what's allowed and what's not? Or, they can still say, that's too green, it looks like a putting green, versus that looks more natural, more real. Can they still specify?
The HOA does have an architectural review component to it.
They just have to allow some form of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. It needs to be compatible with what's already in the community. If everyone's yard is green and luscious and bushy, you're not going to be able to install rocks and cacti in your front yard.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. What else? Anything else that homeowners need to know about?
I like this bill a lot, and it helps out those homeowners that perhaps own two lots adjacent to one another.
Okay.
A lot of documents out there would require a home on each lot. Mm-hmm. Now, this doesn't make much sense for someone that owns two lots next to one another.
Right.
Legislature changed the definition or created a definition for residential use, and essentially will allow owners to install a swimming pool or perhaps a playground or maybe even a tennis court in the adjacent lot to the lot that has the home.
And for future purpose, can that still have a house built on it later on? It still serves the same purpose if they want to sell it later on, right?
It could. If they wanted to sell the lot separately, there are certain restrictions that apply, and they would have to return that adjacent lot to a condition that would allow the building of another home.
Okay, very good. All right. And what about board vacancies? Because, sometimes people just decide they don't want to be on the board anymore, and it's halfway through the year, or, usually when they do that, there's some kind of family circumstance or something going on. What happens then?
Right. Now, if there's a vacancy on a board for any reason whatsoever, the vacancy can be filled by appointment from the remaining directors. The law formerly was that the vacancy had to be by death, resignation, or disability, and we found that there were just some inherent unintended limitations with that sort of legislation.
What was the alternative to that? It had to be voted on?
Correct.
Okay.
Through an election by the members, which is expensive, and sometimes it's difficult to meet quorum, and it's just not the easiest thing to do when you have a seat that needs to be filled quickly.
Okay, on the kind of devil's advocate end of that,
Sure.
I could see where there are some associations out there where there are people who would kind of join together and get elected on the board because they are those people who are most well known in the community, and then pass that board seat off to someone else to delegate and take care of things, because this would now allow them to do that. Are you fearful that that could happen? Do you think that there is anything in place to keep that from happening?
That's a great question, and you bring up a very important part of this legislation. It limits the appointee's term to that of the person the term that they are filling.
Okay.
So if the person has 1 year left in their term when they resign or whatever, and that's what the vacancy is, the appointed person will only serve for 1 more year.
Okay.
At the expiration of that year, then there would have to be an election. So it wouldn't. It's built into it a protection to keep people from just being appointed ad nauseum.
Now, do you feel like HOAs have a good balance of power? Do you feel like they're too powerful? Do you feel like they need more strength? How do you feel about HOAs?
I love HOAs. I think they do a good job in terms of protecting property values. A lot of people out there want the comfort of knowing that if their neighbor parks an RV in the front yard, that it's not going to be there forever.
Right.
The one thing that is important, though, for a successful community association is education. Education of the board members, education of all that are involved with the community operation, including management as well.
There are some things that happen among boards. Couple of examples for you. One, for example, when the original builder moves out and the remaining lots are going to go to a different builder, the HOA can bring down some of the minimum requirements for the neighborhood. They can allow less square footage than the original houses that were built and that sort of thing. Is there anything that the homeowners, other than coming to the meetings and voting, is there anything they can do to stop things like that from happening?
Well, it's all going to be determined by the documents that govern that association. Each association is different, and the documents say different things. If the owners want their documents to say something or provide for something that they don't currently provide for, amendment is the best way to create some provision that the owners feel is necessary for the community. And
do you ever see that that things get changed in a neighborhood based on the board member's request? So, for example, a board member wants to put a pool in their backyard bigger than allowable, so they get on the board and pass it through. Or do you find that most people who are willing to give up their time and volunteer for this position are really credible and looking out for the interest of the neighborhood? Because you see a lot of these. So what's your opinion on that?
Sure. I find that most board members take the job seriously. They run it like a business.
That's good to know.
And they know that they're in charge, not only of their property, but other people's property, and more importantly, other people's money. They recognize that it's not just their assessments that they are responsible for determining how to spend. It's their neighbors. And ultimately, that's who they have to answer to. And you'd be very surprised how often we hear the accusation that the director's going to use this money to build a pool in their backyard or go to Fiji. But the reality is everyone really takes the job seriously and wants to do whatever they can to better the community.
Very good. Well, we definitely appreciate the information. And if people do want to serve on their board, what is a good place, a good resource for them to go to just to get more education for themselves and information on the position if they're thinking about running for their own HOA board?
Sure. I do encourage them to attend as many meetings as possible. That's a good way to get an idea of how it runs. But if they're already on the board or they're considering being on a board, Community Association Institute. It's a nationwide group that focuses on education of board members. And there's also a local Houston chapter. So anyone that's interested in volunteering, I certainly encourage them to look up CAI and see what information that they have that can help them.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Brady is from Roberts Markel Weinberg, an attorney. He is an attorney here in the Houston area, and we do appreciate you very much coming on the show and sharing this information, because HOA information changes regularly, and it really does affect all of us that are homeowners. So we definitely appreciate the information.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks. All right. We'll be right back after a commercial break with more here on Houston Real Estate Radio.